Arc welders are expensive, and for a while now, I have been wanting to see if I could actually build one myself. So in this project, I'm going to try turning old microwave oven transformers into a homemade arc welder. The goal is simple: low voltage, very high current, and hopefully enough power to strike an arc and maybe even weld some steel. But as you will see later in the video, things did not go completely according to plan. The first thing I had to do was to remove the original secondary windings from both transformers. In a microwave, these windings are designed to generate a very high voltage, usually in the thousands of volts, which is obviously not what we want for a welder. For welding, we want pretty much the opposite. We need a much lower voltage but with a much higher current output, so that meant the original windings had to go. This part of the process takes a bit of effort because microwave transformers are built very solidly. After some cutting, hammering, and a bit of patience, I was finally able to clear out the space and prepare both transformers for the new winding. I rewound both transformers with 8 tons of thick cable on the secondary side. The cable's thickness is 6 mm square. The plan was to connect the transformers in a way that would give enough output for welding. I connected the input sides of the transformers in parallel. After wiring everything up, I measured the output voltage, and it was only around 12 volts. That is a bit too low for a proper arc welder. I also wanted to measure the output current, but my meter was only limited to 20 amps, and the output current can be anywhere between 100 to 300 amps, which is definitely going to destroy the meter. Since this welder is going to be carrying a lot of current, I will need to use thicker wires for the output. I stripped the ends of the wires and got them ready for connection. One side will be used for the electrode holder, and the other side will be used for the ground connection. Now with the output voltage only being around 12 volts, let's test the welder and see if it can actually weld. After grounding my test piece, I tried striking an arc. It did manage to produce sparks, which was a good sign, but it was nowhere near powerful enough to actually make a proper weld. The voltage is simply too low to strike and maintain a stable arc, which means I won't be able to get a decent weld out of this setup. After struggling for a while to get any proper weld going, I noticed something interesting. When I held the rod against the metal for a bit longer, the tip of the rod started glowing red almost immediately. And that shows that even the voltage is low, the transformers are still delivering a lot of current. But instead of producing a usable weld, all that hit was mostly just bending the rod out of shape. But honestly, I was having way too much fun with this, so of course I had to try another one. I don't know what it is about sparks, they are just way too fun to play with. I also decided to try another piece of metal, but this time, instead of using a welding rod, I decided to just shot the output directly and see what will happen. And one thing I quickly noticed is that whenever I shotted the output, the transformers will vibrate and make a pretty noticeable buzzing sound. After that, I went back to having fun with another rod, and after bending that one out of shape too, I decided to shot the output again. But this time, the smaller transformer had finally had enough of my nonsense. After a little while, the secondary wire started melting, and then the transformer began smoking like crazy. At that point, I immediately unplugged the transformers. But then I realized the most dangerous things in life always seem to be the most exciting. Think about racing cars, paragliding, skydiving, and skiing. So naturally, I decided to plug it back in and get a little more smoke out of the transformer. And honestly, the smoking looked absolutely amazing. But just to be clear, this is definitely not something you should intentionally do. Transformers like this can get extremely hot and dangerous very quickly, so please be careful if you ever attempt anything similar. Looking back at the test, there are really two main issues with this version of the welder. The first problem is voltage. At only around 12 volts, the output is just too low for the kind of arc performance I was hoping for. And the second problem is transformer mismatch. Using two transformers that are not the same size or rating can create all sorts of issues, especially when you are trying to pull a lot of current. So while the idea itself is still promising, this version of the welder definitely needs some changes before it can become something truly usable. For part 2 of this project, I am planning to make two important upgrades. First, I want to find another transformer that better matches the larger one, so the load sharing is more balanced. And second, I'm going to increase the number of turns on the secondary winding, so I can get a higher output voltage. Hopefully, those two changes will make the welder much more capable, and maybe even good enough to actually weld properly. So in part 2, I'm going to rebuild this setup and see if I can finally get the performance I was hoping for from the start. So even though this version didn't fully succeed, I still think the test was worth doing because it showed exactly what needs to be improved. If you enjoyed this build and want to see part 2, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next upgrade. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.